Every so often, football goes exactly to script. Back in 2011, Shane Long scored his final goal in his first spell at Reading. It was a penalty against Cardiff. On Saturday afternoon, exactly 11 years to the day since his last start for the club, Shane Long scored his first goal in his second spell at Reading. It was a penalty against Cardiff. Sometimes things are just meant to be. Hello and welcome to episode 304 of the Tilehurst podcast, where we will be looking back on the Roars' superb victory over Cardiff that has us up and running in the Championship for the new season. My name is Olly Allen, stepping in to host this week's show in place of Marc, who is away, and dialing in from across the Atlantic to join me on today's show is Tilehurst writer Ross Webber. Ross, how are you?
Doing great, thank you there, Ollie. I'm a big smile on my face from listening to that very long-themed introduction there.
Yeah, I was a bit fearful sort of when I found out that I'd be hosting this show in Marc's absence that we would be talking about a defeat, but it turns out I couldn't have planned it much better, really. Shane Long's perfect homecoming at Reading Football Club at the Select Car Leasing Stadium, or back as when he knew it as the Medeski Stadium, and we will get into that very, very shortly. Plenty to talk about from a fantastic performance against Cardiff yesterday. Quickly, though, a shout out, as always, to our sponsors, ZCZ Films, signed up again for the new season. So always appreciative of their support and the backing that they give us, the show and the website and stuff and everything we do. Wouldn't be possible without them. So thank you, as always, to ZCZ Films and also to all of our Patreon subscribers as well, who continue to support our little tip jar over on Patreon. You can join them if you would like, if you like what we do here on Tilehurst with the podcasts and the website. And as you know, you might have seen, we've introduced some post-match videos over the last few months, and also Adam Jones taking over the Twitter space on a Friday night as well. So if you are enjoying what we do, please do go over. Donate as much or as little as you'd like per month. That's patreon.com/the Tilehurst End. Right, then we've kept it off long enough. We have to talk about Reading's first win of the season against Cardiff. That's coming up now in the recap.
Come rain or shine, it's time to relive the latest match action with the recap.
This podcast is sponsored by ZCZ Films, Reading's oldest ultras.
Right, so Paul Ince made just the one change to his starting lineup from the opening day defeat against Blackpool, mainly because he couldn't really make too many changes, as we saw a couple more players out injured. Shane Long was that one change coming in for his first start, as I say, exactly 11 years to the day since his last Reading start against Millwall in 2011. Some things do just right themselves sometimes. Yaki Mato dropping out, he was injured. And we'll talk a little bit more about the injuries in Newsbites, and also the subs bench again was, pretty much made completely full of kids. There was Dean Bizanis, the goalkeeper, obviously, and then all of the outfield players on the bench were all teenagers with 0 starts in a Championship between them. Calvin Abrefa was the only one who'd had any sort of playing time in a Championship before, so no sort of surprise to see him come on as the first sub midway through the second half. Ross, we have to start, I suppose, with the worst part of the game, which was the nightmare start, really. 4 minutes on the clock, a really silly foul to give away on the right-hand side of the box. Cardiff free kick, really poor marking actually from Jeff Hendrick, who I actually felt for a large part had a pretty decent game. Jeff Hendrick on his home debut, but was certainly the man at fault for this Cardiff goal. He completely lost Callum O'Dowda, who had a pretty simple header past Joe Lumley. As I say, Ross, it was a really poor start, and particularly after last week, again conceding after 10 minutes against Blackpool last week. Yes, we went on to win this game yesterday, but it's not a great sign that the first 2 games of the season we've conceded within the first 10 minutes.
No, and it seems to be coming from similar areas too, in that it seems to take Hendrick and Fornar a little bit of time to to get with it, as it were, during games, and to really get up to game speed. I've found that we're a little bit lacking in the middle through the first 20 minutes of the two games, because after Cardiff scored, there was the good save from Lumley shortly after. So there's definitely a little bit of a need to just tidy it up in the first 15 minutes, just make sure that we're putting our foot on the ball and actually establishing some presence in midfield, because, it's the Championship. That midfield battle is important every game. And I think that if Loom can get his visa sorted out this week coming, then maybe we'll see some change up in the middle to try and improve those starts. Who knows?
Yeah, you kind of feel against maybe a better side. We'll come on and talk about quite how good Cardiff are a bit, in a minute. But you almost feel maybe against a better side, the Reading can't afford to be starting these games quite as sloppily as they are, as you say. O'Dowd had that chance shortly after his goal, and Lumley made a pretty decent save. That actually was the only other shot on target that Cardiff had all game after their goal, which I suppose is, in many ways, is a good thing in the fact that Reading restricted them to not many chances at all. And I think after Tom Ince's winning goal, we didn't concede a single shot at all. So, perfect game management in that sense. We have to get on now and talk about Shane Long. Massive impact yesterday for me. Not just because of what a beautiful man. I'm not sure he could get any more beautiful after his first spell, but he's come back with a luscious beard. And he looks superb. He doesn't look a day over 25. I tweeted yesterday, but obviously he was involved in the winning goal. Not only did he help win the penalty, it was his flick on that sort of sent Tom Ince through to round the goalkeeper. Obviously tucked away the penalty as well, but it was his all-round play as well, Ross, wasn't it? He was working hard, he was pressing, he was tirelessly running for 80 minutes, and someone who we are told is still not fully match fit. It was a remarkable performance.
It was kind of like watching an actually effective Sam Baldock out there. It reminded me a lot of what his performances were billed at, in the previous few years, when he was full of running, to his credit, and you could tell he was really trying to get in games, but he just lacked a little bit of presence and a little bit of quality. Not only is Long getting up for these knockdowns, he's actually putting them into dangerous spots, which is encouraging. It's like having a completely it is having a completely different style of striker to Lucas João, which I think should only help as the season goes on. In the three main strikers that we have now, João's obviously silky. His footwork is second to none. You got Mate, who's a powerhouse and can move really fast. And Long's just an experienced player at this level, at this point. So, you'd expect him to not be doing anything too flashy, but getting the basics right and just having a good time really playing for the shirt. It's all you can ask for your options, really, apart from being a bit more fit. That would be good too.
Well, I mean, if he plays like that when he's not fully fit, then, he might be an absolute monster when he is fully fit. And, I was taken aback really at sort of quite how good he was. I was, obviously I'm delighted to see Shane Long back at the football club, but I was one of those people who was kind of a bit skeptical in the sense that, are our memories of him going to be tainted by him sort of slogging it out on the pitch and not really being able to do much? But,
So it's funny that you say that. No, of course. But for my sins, I'm the son of a Southampton fan. Right. And he's been they've been at St. Mary's for the season, most seasons over the last decade or so, and so they saw a lot of Shane Long's career there, and they always said, while he wasn't doing that much in terms of goal involvements, they always appreciated him when he came onto the pitch. He was a hard runner. He always puts in the effort, and you drop down a level, not only to the Championship, but to the lower end of the Championship. We don't need you to be a world beater. We've got one of those in Lucas João. We just need you to be committed and to know what you're doing. And Shane Long knows what he's doing. Yeah, I mean, and you don't necessarily need him to score that many goals. Obviously he stepped up and took the penalty yesterday, but there are players in that team. We'll come on to Tom Ince in a bit, who will score you goals. Hope, as you say, when Lucas João is back fit. To be honest, when João's back fit, Shane Long's probably not a starter. But that almost excites me a bit more, because if you can have Lucas João playing for, I don't know, 65, 70 minutes, and then have Shane Long come on for the final 20,
20, 25 minutes. He was such a nuisance to those Cardiff defenders yesterday. They had no idea really how to handle him.
It's something completely different from the other options that we have. I mean, I can't say for sure what the rookies can offer at this point, but Long is just something a little bit different from everything else I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday it's probably one of the best non-Lucas João lone striker performances that we've seen in recent years, and that's not to slag off someone like George Puskas, who gives his all, but ultimately hasn't been very good in that lone striker role. We know he's much better alongside João up front. Whereas to have that proper alternative now in Shane Long is brilliant. And yeah, just that it's brilliant in itself just to see him back in a Reading shirt, to see him back in those blue and white hoops, but to see him scoring and to see him wheeling away in celebration is something that I'm sure many people didn't think they'd ever see again when he left 11 years ago.
If you had told me in 2011 that one day I'd be watching the return of Shane Long as he wheels away celebrating a goal with Tom Ince, I don't think I would have believed you.
Well, I was going to say there are a couple of tweets that I saw yesterday. One from my very own Ben Thomas, View from Durham writer, obviously been on the podcast several times as well, tweeted to celebrate a Shane Long goal for Reading Football Club with my son, who wasn't born the last time he scored for us, is very special. And it's stuff like that. And Tom McIntyre, obviously a boyhood Reading Football Club fan, said, I admitted to Shane Long last week that as much as I played it cool, I was absolutely buzzing that he'd signed. And it feels very surreal, I have to say. I'm not sure how long it will sort of take to sink in. Maybe it won't throughout the whole season, but just to see Shane Long back in a Reading Football Club shirt is very, very special indeed. But we must move on, because it wasn't just him. It was the whole team yesterday, I have to say. They were brilliant. They absolutely worked their socks off. I was really, really pleased with sort of the effort and the desire from the team. And look, I still have my doubts over Paul Ince sort of tactically and sort of strategy wise, but there's absolutely one thing for sure is that he's a brilliant sort of man motivator. We saw at the back end of last season that he can get this team fighting for games. It was the first time yesterday that we came from behind to win a game since Birmingham away last November. And this is a remarkable stat, Ross. The first time coming from behind to win a game at home since that remarkable Wigan game under Jose Gomez in March 2019. So over 3 years ago, the last time he came from behind to win a game at home.
I'm glad you pulled that stat, because I started having a look for that last night and I gave up because it was so long ago. I hardly remember that game either. I mean, pre-pandemic is decades ago. So my word.
Yeah, it was. I think I have to give a shout out to Dave Handbags Harris, a regular on this podcast as well, who pulled that one up. But yeah, that is a sign of sort of how Paul Ince is getting this team fighting, and his son Tom Ince was almost the epitome of that. I thought he was excellent. I made an early prediction for him to be player of the season in my player ratings yesterday, because if he stays fit and if he can replicate that sort of performance he put in yesterday, there is almost no stopping him. And, look, Tom Ince was for such a long time, one of the most highly rated players in the Championship, and never quite lived up to that expectation. But, what's never been in doubt is that quality that he's got. And he ran his socks off all game yesterday, obviously won the penalty, which we haven't mentioned yet, which I have to say was one of the worst decisions I've ever seen, not to give Curtis Nelson a red card yesterday. It's absolutely bizarre. I mean, we won't talk about it too much, because obviously we did end up winning the game, but I can imagine, thankfully it doesn't matter too much, but I can imagine that if Reading hadn't won that game, there would be an awful lot more talk about what horrendous decision that was, not to send
really. It
Curtis
didn't
Nelson
look
off.
any better just on the TV cameras compared to in the stadium either. I haven't got a clue what's going on there. The ref's immediately saying, well, he's going away from the net, but I don't really know how it's not a goal scoring opportunity if you're still within the width of the D.
Yeah.
It's not exactly beyond a professional attacking football player to put the ball back in the net from that far out. So no, not sure what the ref's on there.
Yeah, I mean, and Tom Ince is left-footed, so it's not as if he's shoved it onto his weaker foot. It's he has got an open goal pretty much to tap into, and Curtis Nelson comes across and makes actually no attempt to get the ball. but as I say, thankfully it doesn't matter too much because Reading did go on to win the game, and almost makes it sweeter that we managed to beat Cardiff with 11 men and didn't need them to go down to 10 men. But yeah, that winning goal I wanted to talk about as well, Ross. We saw it was Bournemouth last season. Tom Ince's hell of a strike against Bournemouth last year, but that goal yesterday, I was sat right behind it in the Dolan, and you could sort of see, and as soon as Tom Ince sort of got the ball from over Ajaria, you could see it in his eyes that he wanted to hit it. And I watched the replay afterwards, and obviously you would have seen this live on the TV camera. I think it's the sort of the camera angle from behind Tom Ince. You see the absolute pace on that ball and sort of the way that it moves. It's not really sort of in that top corner. It's obviously high in the goal, but it's not particularly sort of far out of the reach of the Cardiff goalkeeper. But my God, does it move?
It's just hit so hard as well, and so true. And I think for anyone who's played a lot of football or who's still playing football, when you see the ball sit up like that, your eyes light up. Your heart starts fluttering because you know that you've got a real chance to put some welly behind it. And I think the entire stadium was yelling at Tom to shoot right there. And boy, I was expecting a good hit, but nothing quite that special. What a way to win a football match.
Yeah, I think Paul Ince called it average, which I think was a bit of a joke with his son. But yeah, it's one of those goals where as soon as it sort of leaves his boot and that it ripples the net. It's an absolutely beautiful goal to behold. A couple of other individual shout-outs I sort of wanted to give. Joe Lumley I thought was excellent in goal. And as we say, had a pretty quiet afternoon. Obviously, only had that one other save to make after conceding. But was generally pretty commanding of his box. I thought he was great, sort of geeing up the crowd. So I was sat in a Dolan, and throughout the first half, he was always sort of getting the crowd going. And I saw that there was a moment after full time when he sort of went over to Club 1871 and was celebrating with them. Tom Holmes, I thought was great at the back, was probably the best out of the back three for me. Nesta Guinness-Walker, obviously had a bit of a shaky game against Blackpool last week, but I thought was much, much improved. This time
much better.
Particularly going forward, I think, was briefly involved in Tom Ince's goal as well. And any other particular standouts for you yesterday, Ross?
I'm gonna jump back to Lumley really quickly because it's funny when I wrote down when I took some notes for this, I wrote that he's quietly going about his business, but when I think about it, it's almost the opposite of that. He certainly isn't quietly going about his business. No. He is commanding and noisy in the box. But I think issues that Middlesbrough fans had with Lumley last season notwithstanding, I think when you watch Lumley play, you can see what we were missing last year from not just Southwood, not just Raphael, really any of the keepers that we had last year. Lumley has more confidence and more presence in the box at this level. I have no... I'm fully of the opinion that Southwood was a fantastic shot stopper. And, when it comes to reaction saves, he really was second to none. But, to be a starting goalkeeper in the Championship, you need to be one of the best 50 goalkeepers playing in England right now. And I don't know if that's Southwood. I don't know if that's Lumley either, but Lumley just looks more like the finished package to me at this point. So it's certainly really exciting to feel more confident in the back line, and I certainly do with Lumley. And I'll say Guinness-Walker as well. Much better. He was caught out of position a lot last week, and I think he's still learning. Exactly where he's expected to be defensively at this point. I saw Ajaria covering for him a lot, but much more encouraging than last week. He's certainly getting forward more, getting more confident. Saw him try a few Cruyff turns that were a little aimless, but entertaining yesterday. So good to see that confidence really coursing through the side.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's Nesta Guinness-Walker's only second game in the Championship, so there's still always going to be teething problems. And on Lumley, I think I don't know whether it is a pure optics thing, but he seems to be a much taller goalkeeper than we've had. Yes. I think Luke Southwood and Raphael aren't short, but they're not sort of reaching the sort of 6'3", 6'4". I think Lumley is 6'3", and he's just generally a lot more commanding of his area. I think that there was one sort of slightly shaky punch yesterday that he missed completely, but beyond that, I think he was exceptional in sort of commanding his box. finally, then on Cardiff, I just wanted to sort of touch on Cardiff themselves because it is a little bit difficult. Obviously it's still incredibly early in the season to sort of make any judgment on any side, and it's a bit difficult to sort of know how good this result actually is. Obviously Cardiff finished quite low down the table last season. They've had a lot of change over the summer. Around 15 new players coming in. I worked out 8 of their starting 11 yesterday were all new signings, so they're a team much like Reading really, who are still gelling together. But as I say, beat Norwich last weekend, and there's a lot of sort of hype around them. So for Reading to go and get that win yesterday was obviously massive.
Yeah.
It was almost as if we out Cardiff. I found a stat earlier. There was a lot said about Cardiff's sort of aggressive approach against Norwich on the opening day. They were second for fouls in the Championship on the opening weekend with 16, and Reading bettered that yesterday. They made 17 fouls against Cardiff yesterday, partly probably because the referee didn't have his best game, but it was a case that Reading frustrated Cardiff, and I think just to get off the mark, obviously as I say, it is hard to judge sort of how good results can be at this stage of the season. I think back there was one, I think it was 2014-15, I think, possibly wrong, but we drew 2-2 with Wigan on the opening day, who had reached, I think they reached the playoffs the season before. And sort of everyone thought that was a really, really good result because we'd just drawn 2-2 with the Wigan side who'd got to the playoffs, but then Wigan ended up getting relegated that season, and that 2-2 draw didn't look so good. So it is hard to sort of make any kind of judgment at this early stage. But I think probably the main thing, Ross, is just getting off the mark, because the last thing you want to be doing is sort of waiting around for your first points, your first win, and just to have that sort of weight off your shoulders to get those 3 points, sort of, no matter who they come and no matter who they come against.
Yeah, no, I agree. When I was watching it yesterday, the BBC Berkshire commentary, and Tim Dello is mostly just happy to have the points, and that's kind of where I am at this stage. Like, I'll take points from anyone. I don't care if we beat every team in the top half and we lose to all of the relegation candidates this season. If that's the mathematic that keeps us up, that's totally fine. We'll take anything, and I also think that Reading's squad is a little light, obviously very light right now because of the injuries. So that will probably start to tell at some point in the season. And just the more points we can get on the season early while players are fresh, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still ultimately of the belief that we just need 3 worse teams than us this season ultimately. And any points on the board, as I say, the last thing you want to be doing, I think there's only 2 teams in the Championship now, Bristol City and Huddersfield, who haven't got any points on the board. So, we'd have been in the bottom 3 if we'd lost yesterday. So, just to get off the mark, and no matter who they come against, it's a massive result, and it's a bonus when the performance is as good as it was yesterday. When everyone was working so hard. Let's round off the recap then, and let's hear from Paul Ince and his thoughts on the win over Cardiff, and then we'll get into the mailbag.
I still feel aggrieved after last week, because I felt we should have won that game too, but it's just probably an extension of what we performed in the second half against Blackpool, taken into today's game. By far the better team, again created chance after chance, just not making it easier for ourselves. But and then you can see the goal. We give a silly foul away, and I keep talking to my players about stop giving stupid fouls away, and we did that. We can see the goal. But one thing about this team, they respond, and they got togetherness and the spirit to keep going. And once we got the penalty, which was a blatant penalty, keeper should have, whoever, I think it was Nelson, should have been sent off. The ref says that Thomas wasn't going to shoot, which baffles me, because he's gone round the goalkeeper, he's got an open goal. So why he wouldn't shoot would baffle me. That should have been a sending off. There was a second handball in the first half. So disappointed really to coming at 1-1. Really was, because I thought we started to get back into the game, we started to find our groove. And listen, I just said to lads at half time, listen lads, can we have a continuation of this? Because sometimes no 2 halves are the same, But listen, we started well, on the front foot, and we got deserved the winning goal, and what a goal it was.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you R's!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
Right then, mailbag time then. First of all, one from, I mentioned him earlier, Ben Thomas. Slightly tongue-in-cheek, I sense. But Ben says, how will we ask for formal apologies from everyone who has written us off when we get promoted, and in what order?
I want no apologies, just points. Just bring me the points. Once we get to 45, then I'll take apologies from anywhere, you know?
I mean, it is as I was saying, Ross, we probably will lose more games than we win this season, and it probably is going to be a bit of a slog. So it is important just to try and enjoy every victory, particularly yesterday when it was that first win.
I completely agree. It's a nice August day, like there are worries about the season to come, but there's still time to fix it at this point. Let's just enjoy the victory. And, it's sometimes over here in America, you'll refer to seasons as revenge tours if they're coming back against some perceived injustices the previous season. So maybe this is our revenge tour against the business plan.
I mean, I think we had Revenge Month under Paunovic last season, which I think didn't actually end up being that revengeful. So hopefully this goes slightly better. Loyal Royal says, great start. What do you think we can do better on and off the pitch? Love everything going on with all the fan-led activities. The big screen was great. I have to agree. I think there was I was saying to Ross beforehand that there's definitely. Well, there was definitely a buzz around the ground yesterday, whether that's just the sort of the early season optimism, the sort of the fact that it was a very, very nice day to be watching football, though I was sweating by the end of 90 minutes. But, it was, they did feel something a little bit different. And maybe it is that early season optimism and maybe it won't last. But there was a real sort of buzz around the ground yesterday. And, the club are doing great stuff in terms of, getting that fan zone going with the big screen and sort of, playing the lunchtime Premier League game before it as well. In terms of things we can do better, Ross, one thing on the pitch and one thing off the pitch for you, maybe?
Things we can do better. Well, we've talked about the starts, so I won't mention that again. I think that something we can do better, I talked about it last season, is the substitutions. Obviously, we're a little bit limited at the moment in what we can actually do, given that Paul Ince doesn't seem to trust his young players as much as some of the other fans do. But I would say that just making sure that we're replacing players who are looking tired, because I think sometimes we leave people on a little bit too long. I often find that Hoylett gets a little bit leggy towards the end of games. So just taking a chance on these players, and if we have to have kids on the bench, then let's give them a little bit of game time, especially if we're chasing points.
Well, I can tell you've read the podcast plan, because we are moving swiftly on now to a question on the younger players. From Fab, who says, where does Ince actually stand on playing younger players? He intimated one thing last week and did another this week, albeit I suspect his hand was forced. With a paper-thin squad, why not blood younger talents? And as I mentioned earlier, it was pretty much as young and as inexperienced as they come. The substitutes bench yesterday, all teenagers. Only Kelvin Abrifa had league minutes. I think only Kelvin, Ihipatioman, and Kian Levy had played in the cup before. I think Louis Holzman played against Kidderminster in the FA Cup. But generally very, very inexperienced. 17-year-old Basil Fuma, who I have to admit I had not heard of before 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon, getting onto the subs bench for the first time at 17. So it is a very inexperienced bench. We'll come on to the injuries and stuff at the moment, and obviously it was a similar debate last season in terms of the trust that Pauno had in these younger players. And it is, I always seem to be reiterating it, but it is a very young set of under 21s. And obviously it was 23s last season. It's 21s.
It is.
This year.
I find it a little strange. I think I wouldn't be surprised if suddenly we see the bench really fill out with experienced players once September rolls around, because there's just that little bit of me that thinks that Paul Ince comes from that generation of good football men who think that, well, the best way to get the chairman and the director of football to realize I need new players is to name a bench full of kids. It's a very Harry Redknapp, Sam Allardyce tactic to just be like, well, look, I need more signings. Look at this. Look at my resources right now. So, I hope that I'm onto something there. If not, and we're still naming teenagers on the bench come October, then that'll be a little bit concerning. But I wouldn't be super surprised if that bench, starts to fill out a little bit more once the transfer window's over.
Yeah, I mean, we'll hopefully see plenty of younger players on Tuesday night against Stevenage, and we'll get onto that in the big match preview a bit later on, and we might be able to see in that game quite how they sort of cope with the standards and sort of the pressures of first team football. I expect it will be a very young side, players who were on the bench yesterday, briefly, Mihir Patioman, Clark, Michael Craig, Cian Levy, maybe even Basil Tuma getting some minutes on Tuesday night, and we will be able to properly assess quite which younger players might be able to play a role in the first team this season. Well, that's it. Thank you very much, as always, for your questions with the mailbag. You can always get involved every week with the mailbag. We always put a call out on Twitter for questions, or you can get in touch on the email. That's tilehurstend@gmail.com. Right. Usually we'd be going straight into Newsbites now, but Marc, our regular podcast host, is bringing back Pubchat. Long-term listeners of the podcast will remember the Pubchat section of the show that was we used to do back in the day, sort of talking about key issues at Reading of the time. And Marc this week has been speaking to University of Reading professor Ed Hawkins, the man behind the Show Us Your Stripes campaign that plays a key part in Reading's home kit this season, and actually, as Ed reveals, the away kit as well that will hopefully be revealed in the coming days. Marc chatted to Ed all about how the idea came about, sort of how he found the process, and also the changes sort of he's encouraging the club to make in the fight against climate change. So settle in for that one. This is our pub chat with University of Reading professor Ed Hawkins.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you R's!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
So welcome to the return of Pubchat, the Tilehurst End podcast way of delving into some issues around Reading Football Club and the wider game that we maybe don't always have time for in the regular show. And what a perfect way to start this feature this season than with the man behind Show Your Stripes, the initiative that led to one of the more interesting Reading kits of recent years. And that man is Ed Hawkins of Reading University. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
And where to start other than how did this kind of initiative come about and how did the club start getting involved with it?
So, the club have been thinking about various issues of sustainability for quite a while, and they contacted the university to get them involved in some of those conversations. The university has a lot of expertise in sustainability issues, and the club wanted to do something very proactive to improve their own credentials and to make some very positive changes. And as part of those discussions, the club became aware of the climate stripes as a way of communicating about the climate risks that we face. And they simply suggested, could we use the stripes as part of our communication? And that led into thinking about having it on the kit as well.
So when was it kind of thought about of having it on the sleeves? And as you say, it's kind of thought about having it on the kit. Was there ideas of maybe having it? You could maybe have it across a bigger part of the kit, maybe even having it across the whole kit. How was the idea with the sleeves and everything sort of narrowed down on?
Yeah, so the discussion has been going on for several months actually about the design and how it would be best to integrate the stripes into the design, and there were various different ideas suggested over those months. It became clear that obviously the blue and white hoops are critical to keep on the kit, and so it was looking for a way of integrating the stripes that wouldn't interfere with that fundamental importance of keeping the hoops. And so I think the club, in partnership with the kit designers, came up with the idea to put it on the sleeves and on the shorts as well.
And let's talk about the the kind of process that came behind for you getting involved in the initiative as well. What was kind of the inspiration for starting out Show Your Stripes and having the university as a kind of way of getting into a more local kind of research topic than maybe a lot of universities go in for this sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, the stripes have been used very widely in all kinds of areas over the last few years. For example, we actually had a show at London Fashion Week last year when a fashion designer used the stripes as a theme for several different outfits for that London Fashion Week show. We've also had a rock band called Enter Shikari used the stripes throughout their gigs over the course of a couple of years, including at Reading Festival on the main stage. We've had politicians use them, and many other organisations have adopted them as part of their broader communication. But the one thing that we've been missing, I think, has been sport. We haven't really had any involvement from sport in communicating this message to different audiences. And so when Reading Football Club suggested that they would want to integrate it in the kit, we were delighted, because we've been looking for a way to reach that different audience of sports fans to talk about these issues.
Yeah, I suppose what was your kind of initial thoughts on seeing the reaction to the kit? I think there are probably a few fans who are maybe a bit sceptical about it at first, and then it was interesting seeing it being picked up by the media, and obviously with the way that the media, certain places are very positive about it. You then got the kind of usual suspects being negative about it, which I actually think kind of united the fan base behind it a bit more as soon as outside people kind of started criticising it to that extent. What was your sort of feeling as the kind of day unfolded of the announcement?
I think it was. We were expecting to get a few negative reactions. I think that's inevitable. Whenever anyone starts talking about climate change, there are going to be some very negative reactions that result from that. So that was not a surprise for us to see that. It was very pleasing to see that all the positive reactions from the fans about taking up this topic as a key issue for the club, and being a leader in some ways so high up in the leagues of taking this very seriously. And so it was fantastic to see all those positive reactions. We heard about positive reactions from the players as well, which is also great to hear. To see it picked up by all the media was also fantastic. I know the club did a lot of interviews and so on to talk about why they think this is an important issue to talk about, and hopefully we'll see some real changes at the club over the next few months as they sort of start their journey towards becoming more sustainable.
Yeah, have you yourself and the university been involved in that? Because a lot of people would say, I think a lot of people are pointing out that there's Select Car Leasing, which is obviously a car leasing brand, is the main sponsor, and people saying maybe that's not environmentally friendly, but they have their own initiatives, the club have initiatives. Have you been involved, or the university been involved in kind of helping the club to become more sustainable?
Absolutely. I mean, the university, that's how this whole partnership started, actually, about thinking about these issues. The university has a lot of expertise in these issues, and so many people within the university have had those conversations with the club, and I know that the club have lots of plans about solar panels, for example, at the ground and at the training ground. There's discussions about electric car charging points, about cycling facilities, as well as recycling and the food and drink at the ground and water usage. So all of these topics have been discussed, and the club have made some simple changes already, and some of the more complex changes take time, and they recognise that they're at the start of a journey, and they want to bring the fans along as part of that journey into the changes that they can make within the ground during match days, but also far more broadly as the club as a whole.
And let's end this conversation then on what at the moment, I mean, sat here, this interview will get a few days after we sat here, so I don't know when it might come out, but the away kit is something that Reading fans are eagerly awaiting as well. Is there anything you can tell us about that? Is Show Your Stripes involved in the away kit in some way?
So I've certainly seen the away kit, and the climate theme certainly continues on the away kit, but exactly how it's represented, I'm afraid everyone's going to have to wait and see. Personally, I think actually the away kit is the more beautiful kit, actually, and if I was going to buy one, I would be buying the away kit. And so I hope that all the fans have a similar reaction when they see it in the next week or so.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for coming on. It's been very illuminating having you on and talking about this, and hopefully everyone listening at home has been entertained by it as well.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Keep up to date with all things Reading FC. Follow the Tilehurst End on Facebook and Twitter.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by ZCZ Films. Remember, if you want to get involved in sponsoring the show, drop us an email to thetylehurstend@gmail.com.
Right, time for some news bites then, and hopefully, as you just heard from Ed Hawkins, hopefully we'll have some news on the away kit in the next couple of days. But until then, we are still without a second strip. I suppose the main bit of news really is the latest on the injuries, which unfortunately seem to be getting worse by the week. Really, as we mentioned earlier, Yaku Mate dropped out of the squad completely against Cardiff. Paul Ince confirmed afterwards that he got a calf injury. And the lead up to the game is going to be out for around 3 to 4 weeks. Paul Ince also confirmed that Obi Ajaria played despite having a hamstring issue, which I have to say fair play to Obi. He's someone in the past who maybe people have sort of looked at as a player who maybe sort of ducks out of games, but the fact that he played, over an hour with a hamstring issue yesterday is testament to the commitment that Ajaria's put in this season. Lucas Shaw still out, Scott Down as well, Femi Aziz, Sam Hutchinson also out. Mamadou Loum is also still unavailable. That's a visa issue. Paul Ince confirmed he was going to go to the Home Office. Mamadou Loum, that is not Paul Ince. On
maybe
Sunday,
he's taking him.
Maybe on Sunday on Monday to try and sort that one out. So hopefully we'll see Mamadou Loum. Probably not Tuesday against Stevenage, but hopefully next weekend against Rotherham. The other glaring one, I suppose, is Naby Sarr, who is still yet to be officially confirmed as a Reading player. Obviously, has been pictured in a Reading shirt. We talked a bit about this in the transfer show in midweek. So to go back and either watch on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast on the latest on Naby Sarr. As far as everyone's aware, he's still training with the first team. He's pretty much as close to being a Reading player as you could possibly be without getting that official EFL clearance. Possibly a bit of an issue with maybe budgets in terms of Reading needing to get players out before they can bring someone like Naby Sarr in, which is also a possible hold up for the reason with Amari Hutchinson, someone else who we understand is pretty close to being a Reading player, just needs that EFL clearance on loan from Chelsea. Amari Hutchinson, so hopefully those things can get sorted. Less than 4 weeks now to go until transfer deadline day. We spoke about it a bit earlier, but hopefully, once these issues do get sorted out, once these players do come back from injuries, we're always going to have injuries throughout the season, and it's been done to death that this club has had horrific luck with injuries the last few seasons. But hopefully, the squad does look, slightly. It was the same last season where we had a bit of a threadbare squad during August, and at different parts during the season. But once players come back, we're looking a lot healthier.
Yeah, for sure. It was all going so well in the transfer window, considering our restrictions, that I sort of forgot that technically Liam Moore and George Pubchat are still Reading players, and they're still hanging around somewhere in the background on very high wages. Do we actually know for sure if either of those players are in the country right now?
I think both of them are. I think obviously Liam Moore is currently injured.
Oh yes,
so
yeah.
He's doing rehab somewhere, but I'm pretty sure George Pubchat is still in Reading training.
Okay.
But it's just the fact that again that's a slightly confusing one in the sense that maybe he's not 100% fit, George Pubchat, but he's not injured, so and he's still a Reading Football Club player. So you have to I think it's pretty clear that he obviously wants to leave, but when you're putting on no disrespect to Calvin Iheanacho, who I thought was pretty good when he came on for the last 10 minutes yesterday, you probably would rather have someone experienced like George Pubchat maybe on the bench. But I suppose it's one of those things where we'll never know really. I suppose with a situation like that. There has been some transfer activity with the women's side. 3 new signings in one day earlier this week. So if you want new transfers, the women's team and a team to keep an eye out for, Jackie Burns, goalkeeper, and Lauren Wade, who's a midfielder. They both played for Northern Ireland at Euro 2022. Wade in particular is probably the standout signing there. Seems a really, really exciting player. was probably one of the non-line's best players at the European Championships. So that's a promising signing. And also former Bristol City striker Charlie Wellings, who's come in from Celtic. We are trying to do a lot more coverage on the women's team on this podcast, particularly obviously in light of the Lionesses' success at Euro 2022. So if you do want to get involved, we're looking for help with the men's and the women's team, but particularly if you are a follower of the women's team, and would like to get involved with a Tilehurst end, we'd love to do more of them. We are producing match reports for every WSL game we had last season. So hopefully we can keep that up this season, and maybe a few more bits of sort of analysis, and maybe on the podcast as well. So if you do want to get involved in that sense, please do get in contact. I will give a little plug to another podcast, the Reading Between the Lines podcast. That's at Reading BTL on Twitter. They've gone and done a dedicated Reading FC Women podcast over the last week. If you do sort of want to get more into Kelly Chambers' side over the next 12 months because of the Euro 2022 success, do sort of go and check that out. It's quite a good guide sort of to background for the team and sort of the key players and stuff like that. So do go and check that out. At Reading BTL on Twitter is that podcast's handle. In terms of the other academy teams at Reading, not too much going on. Neither of them have started their seasons yet. They do get underway over the next 7 days. The under-18s start away at Wigan in the Professional Development League next weekend, and the under-21s start in the Premier League Professional Development League away against Sheffield United on Tuesday night. Obviously, Reading's academy has been downgraded to Category 2 this season, so they're not playing at the very, very highest level of academy football this season. But hopefully, that status comes back as soon as possible. And sort of in the meantime, they didn't perform particularly well either of the under-18s or the 23s last season. So hopefully, maybe a drop down in standards slightly will help us pick up some silverware at youth level this season. As I say, the 21s get their season underway on Tuesday night. Also on Tuesday night, of course, is the first team's game. So it's going to be a little bit of a decision to make for maybe Michael Gilks and Paul Ince as well, and sort of which players play in that 21s game and which players come up to the first team to face Stevenage. But we'll discuss that now in the big match preview.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you R's!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
Yeah, so 2 games over the next week for Reading. Our first Saturday week of the new season. Plenty of them to come throughout the campaign. But yeah, first up on Tuesday night, the first round of the Carabao Cup against Stevenage. Plenty of cup history with Stevenage. There's always a couple of sides that Reading seem to always be drawn against in the cups. Man United being one. Luton we seem to have had in the cups over the last few years, but Stevenage also we've had over the last decade. They obviously knocked us out of the FA Cup in 2012, I want to say, I think it was, and obviously had that infamous FA Cup tie in 2018 where there was that big hoo-ha, all the players not coming over to clap the fans after I think it was the FA Cup third round in 2018. After it was a dire 0-0 draw away from home. Reading then did go and then win the replay 3-0 with John Daddy Bodvarsson hat-trick, the infamous kit clash game where Reading were wearing their blue and white hoops and Stevenage were wearing some sort of variation of a white away kit, and it was a foggy night in itself, and quite frankly nobody could sort of tell the difference between them. And I think it was Reading's kit man had to go back to Hogwood as it was then to go and get Reading's away kit, their orange away kit that season, and Reading played the second half in orange. So I think John Dabo Varson holds the esteemed title of being the only Reading player to score a hat-trick in the same game wearing 2 different coloured kits, which is quite a stat, and obviously can't happen this season because we are yet to have an away kit. So hopefully Stevenage bring a different colour to either white or blue on Tuesday night. A couple of former Royals in their ranks, Jake Taylor and also Terence Van Kooten might well feature on Tuesday night. We discussed it briefly, Ross, but we should expect a very, very young squad, I think, for this game. I think Swansea last year in the first round of the Cup, the average age of the starting 11 was 19 years old, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was a similar sort of age, possibly even younger this time around.
I think so. It's going to be very interesting for sure to see what squad is named, because I think that we will all be expecting the very young squad. There are certainly some players I'd like to see. I'd like to see John Clark get the start this time around. I think he's looked interesting through preseason, and obviously he got on for a little bit yesterday. I'd like to see Jamari Clark again, the other Clark at the other end of the pitch. And I'm going to take a stab at this name that you've been pronouncing very well, Hibhat Himan, and I got that horribly wrong. But I'd like to see the big man up top as well. Maybe we could, change up the formation and see if there's anything else interesting that we can do with this set of players. But on the other hand, from that sort of youth angle, you do wonder if Paul Ince might be of the opinion that just trying to keep that winning feeling and keep the momentum going is the thing that will be in the best interest of the squad, especially playing a lower league team. I think that it might serve our interest best to play a few of the first team players, just to try and make it feel a little bit more competitive. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bouzanis get in there for Lumley. I wouldn't be super surprised to see Holmes stay in, perhaps as the captain on Tuesday night, and maybe Fornar as well, because I think that once Loom makes his way into this squad, it might be a little while before Fornar gets a chance to start again. So getting minutes under his belt now really might be the way. But I'm looking forward to this one. I'm really looking forward to actually seeing some of these kids that are being, the kids are being traipsed around the country to all of these games. So might as well get them on the pitch at some point.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. I think, ultimately this is almost a test to see which of these younger players might have a role to play this season. Even when, say injured players come back and a few more bodies come through the door in a transfer window, we are still going to have to be relying on a couple of these players to be bulking out the squad on occasion. So, to give them that run out against, a League Two side nonetheless, they've won both of their games in League Two so far, Stevenage. So they are, one of the better teams in that division. I mean, I suppose we aren't too bothered about a run in the League Cup this season, but I suppose the main thing here is just avoiding a cup shock. We do not want to repeat it. They're better than, division, sort of division standard wise, they're better than Kidderminster. But, after what happened in January, we do not want to be losing to another lower league team in a cup competition.
Yeah, I think it would just be a good sign of the seriousness with which the club is taking just its competitive fixtures, let alone anything else, if they were to go out and treat this seriously and at least look for a win, not make it very, very clear that they are, just there to fulfill their duties and get the game over. Because I know sometimes that the Carabao Cup can come with that sort of label. But I just don't think that Reading are in any particular position to not take games seriously at the moment. They really need to be trying to keep that momentum going in every game they have.
Well, yeah, we'll hope that momentum does continue on Tuesday night and then into Saturday. Rotherham away is our next Championship League fixture. Rotherham, of course, the stereotypical Championship yo-yo team at this point in time. They've been, either promoted or relegated in sort of, 4, 5, 6 years, really, Rotherham. Promoted from League One last season. Lost two of their best players, actually, over the summer. Michael Hickway and Michael Smith both went to Sheffield Wednesday, obviously dropping back down to League One. So not too sure what that says about Rotherham's sort of attractiveness and the fact they were willing to go to Yorkshire rivals to play for Sheffield Wednesday. Not too much either, sort of in their recruitment stakes. A couple of names that I picked out: Tom Ince, who was at Hull last season, I believe; Connor Washington, who, much like Rotherham, floats between League One and the Championship. Lee Peltier, who's a very experienced fullback, played for, and who's at Middlesbrough, Cardiff, Huddersfield. But they are almost, certainly a relegation contender, I'd say, this season. Ross, I think, in most people's pre-season predictions, Rotherham would be down there. Reading down there in most people's predictions as well. But is this a game? It's very, very early in the season to be calling it a 6-pointer, so I'm certainly not going to do that. But this must be a game, surely, that Reading sort of have got a target to win at least.
I think that's fine to call it a 6-pointer. I mean, in the end of the day, all of the games are worth the same amount of points, right? So, these are 3 points that we could use to prop ourselves up in March or April. It doesn't really matter when we win them. And I think that a lot of what helped us keep that sort of cushion between us and the rest of the bottom three last season was having a decent first half of the season and doing okay. There was that little spell after we lost to Huddersfield earlier in the season where we strung some results together. We put some points on the board, and those points really helped to the end. So I think Rotherham with a week off because of the pitch issues in Coventry, it's not the best time to have to take a break in the middle of your getting warmed up for the season. So I think again, it's all about momentum. Let's just keep this momentum going. Let's keep putting points on the board. If we come away with a goal scored and a point next weekend against Rotherham, I think that's fine. But there's no reason that this squad can't be looking for more against Rotherham. I don't think. I think Reading are better than most people had them down, and they're going to surprise some people. Rotherham should not be a team that they're surprising, though. Rotherham should be a team that they're beating, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, taking it very literally, Cardiff have better players than Rotherham, and Reading beat Cardiff. So, Reading should, at least be going and being competitive against Rotherham. As Ross says, no game for Paul Warne's side this weekend. They were meant to be playing Coventry, but that game got postponed because of the state of the pitch at CBS Arena. Do go and check that out if you haven't. Those pictures, they are genuinely horrific. That pitch up at Coventry, no blame on Coventry. They had obviously they shared a pitch with a rugby team, which obviously Reading can have some sympathy for. And obviously, a lot of the Commonwealth Games stuff was also played at the CBS Arena over the last couple of weeks. So no blame attached to Coventry. But yeah, do go and check out those pictures because it is an absolute mud bath, that pitch up there at the moment. Rotherham did draw 1-1 at home to Swansea on the opening weekend of the season. They conceded an absolute, again, something to check out, absolute belter of the goal from the Swansea centre-back, I think his name's Harry Darling. Absolute belter of the goal from him. So do go and check that one out as well. 1-1 draw to Swansea on their opening day. So they are unbeaten, but they've only played one game so far. But yeah, definitely one to be targeting, hopefully. Let's get into some predictions then. No one actually predicted a Reading win against Cardiff on Saturday, which comes after no one predicted a defeat to Blackpool on the opening day. So no one has got off the mark yet in the prediction league this season. So there is a title to be won if someone can get off the mark against Rotherham. Predictions don't actually count for the League Cup game, so this is just for a bit of fun, Ross. But can you see us progressing against Stevenage on Tuesday?
Yeah, go on then. Let's do it on penalties, just for a bit of fun and drama on a midweek night,
I think Carabao Cup games go straight to penalties after 90 minutes, so there's no extra time. So, if it is a draw against Stevenage, which it is, again, look, it depends ultimately on sort of what sort of team Reading put out. But, I can get on board with that. I can entirely see that. If we
make it to penalties, we've got the legendary penalty stopper Dean Bouzanis ready to go.
Of course,
so, there we go. We're sorted.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I think he's infamous for saving. But I think he saved quite a few on. Was it Sutton's run to the what's it called now? The Papa John's Trophy final.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
Last season. He's got a bit of a reputation. So might be nice to see him pull that one out. And then up to Rotherham on Saturday. Prediction for that one, Ross.
3-0 Reading. I think we've got our tails up. I'm very confident. Tell me if you think I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I just think we've been the better team in both of our games so far. So I am confident, and I think that it's time for this pressure that we've been applying in every game to really start telling next weekend. We're gonna come out and we're gonna storm it.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair to say we've been the better team overall. I think if you take out the first 20 minutes of both games, then for sure we've definitely been the better team. So if we can start fixing these, nightmare starts and actually start a game well for once, then as I say, on paper at least, Reading's squad is a lot better than Rotherham's side. I rate Paul Warne as a manager. If you haven't listened to the podcast on BBC Sounds, I think it's called Moment of Truth, I think, which follows Paul Warne and also Carl Robinson of a team who shall not be named. The back end of last season, they're completely mic'd up. I think it's sort of for their last 7 weeks, and you really get insight into Paul Warne and sort of his managerial strategy, and he comes across as a really, really nice bloke and also a really strong tactical manager. So nothing against Paul Warne, but I just think that set of players up at the New York Stadium this season might well struggle. And it should be a game that Reading should be definitely getting a point out of, and hopefully 3 as well. But that just about then rounds up this week's episode of the Tilehurst podcast. Plenty to talk about, plenty of optimism as well, finishing off with a 3-0 prediction from Ross. Actually, I haven't actually gone for my prediction yet for Rotherham. I will say let's go 2-1 to Reading next week. So that almost certainly means, going off the basis of the predictions so far, that we are going to lose up at Rotherham because no one predicted a Reading win against Cardiff. No one predicted a Reading defeat against Blackpool. So I suspect we may get a flurry of Reading win predictions at the weekend. So hopefully it does finally come off. But yeah, Mark will hopefully be back after the Rotherham game to look back on that one. I think we didn't have a midweek game, possibly the following week. It's a chaotic fixture list at the moment. But yeah, Mark will be back to look at that Rotherham game. All that's left for me to say is, Ross, thank you very much for joining me this week.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. Always fun to talk about Reading.
And thank you very much to you at home for listening. Reading are off the mark in the Championship for 2022-23. And we might have no away kit, hardly any fit first-team players, and certainly no luck from referees when it comes to red cards. But what we do have is team spirit, and we have Shane Long. Come on, you R's.
You smile, funny